So in this section that we will be covering today is entitled The Role of the Psychotherapist. And just a reminder that we read earlier in this, in that everyone involved in helping other people, no matter what the form, everyone is a psychotherapist. Anytime you're there to help somebody. So this does not mean in the role of a psychotherapist is not limited to someone that has some credentials or licensure. This applies to all miracle workers and people working in many different professions. So hello and welcome to Miracles on High Plains. My name is Jonica and our reader for this session is David S.
The psychotherapist is a leader in the sense that he walks slightly ahead of the patient and helps him to avoid a few of the pitfalls along the road by seeing them first. Ideally, he is also a follower, for one should walk ahead of him to give him light to see. Without this one, both will merely stumble blindly on to nowhere. It is, however, impossible that this one be wholly absent if the goal is healing. He may, however, not be recognized. And so the little light that can be then accepted is all there is to light the way to truth.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things I really like about this take on psychotherapy is that both participants, because we're really talking about one-on-one relationships, that's the general context here. Both participants are both leaders and followers. There's not a leader and a follower. As a matter of fact, the whole purpose of the relationship is to attain perfect equality and oneness. And so the psychotherapist is also a follower of the divine one who walks ahead of him and gives him light to see. That would be the ideal state, that the person helping is following the divine one, but that's not always the case. And so when it's not, when that is not recognized, then a little light that is all that may come in, but that is enough to get started on the way to truth. Remember, in all healing, the most important thing is the direction that we are headed. And ultimately, so we have, even in this therapeutic relationship, a progression depending on how much understanding is involved in the relationship. And on one end of the progression, they don't yet recognize the role of the divine light bringing about all healing. And then there's levels along the way until we reach ultimately the highest level, which we'll talk about here today, which is where the psychotherapist fully realizes the role of the divine one and is conscious of the goal of achieving perfect equality that the therapeutic relationship is intended to do. So, as we read, pay attention so that you discern where along that spectrum is a specific paragraph referring to, because that will change and there'll be clues given along the way that will help you to get a sense for that. David?
Trying to get my video on for you people. Healing is limited by the limitations of the psychotherapist, as it is limited by those of the patient. The aim of the process, therefore, is to transcend these limits. Neither can do this alone. But when they join, the potentiality for transcending all limitations has been given them. Now, the extent of their success depends on how much of this potentiality they are willing to use. The willingness may come from either one at the beginning, and as the other shares it, it will grow. Progress becomes a matter of decision. It can reach almost to heaven or go no further than a step or two from hell.
Mhm. So you really can sense the progression here, where they initially at the lower levels, the relationship is limited both by the psychotherapist and the patient. But when they join their minds for a common purpose, the Holy Spirit then enters in and blesses that relationship. Now, pay attention to what happens here. When the Holy Spirit blesses it, the potentiality for the relationship to grow and grow and grow is there. That it does not mean that the actuality will happen. That depends. Progress is a matter of decision. The willingness is necessary on the part of the patient in therapy. It's to avail themselves of the guidance that the Holy Spirit provides. That, but whether or not they avail themselves of that guidance depends on their willingness. So, and that can change over time too, especially in a relationship that is of a longer duration. Both the patient and the therapist are becoming more and more aware of the light within them, and they can become more ready and willing to follow that guidance. So it's a very progressive developmental experience that begins no further than a step or two from hell and can extend and to reach almost to heaven. Depends on the individual's willingness to be guided.
It is quite possible for psychotherapy to seem to fail. It is even possible for the result to look like retrogression. But in the end, there must be some success. One asks for help, another hears and tries to answer in the form of help. This is the formula for salvation and must heal. Divided goals alone can interfere with perfect healing. One wholly egoless therapist could heal the world without a word, merely by being there. No one need see him or talk to him or even know of his existence. His simple presence is enough to heal. The ideal therapist is one with Christ. But healing is a process, not a fact. The therapist cannot progress without the patient, and the patient cannot be ready to receive the Christ, or he could not be sick. In a sense, the egoless psychotherapist is an abstraction that stands at the end of the process of healing, too advanced to believe in sickness, and too near to God to keep his feet on earth. Now he can help through those in need of help, for thus he carries out, hang on, my screen got screwed up. Now he can help through those in need of help, for thus he carries out the plan established for salvation. The psychotherapist becomes his patient, working through other patients to express his thoughts as he receives them from the mind of Christ.
Okay, so that was a lot there. Again, we've got this full range of progression where it says it can appear as though psychotherapy fails, but in actuality, whenever two people come together for purposes of joining to help one another, there really is some progress made. It may not always seem that way, but the progress is always made. Uh, and then it refers to the ideal therapist. This is on the far end of progression. The ideal therapist is one with Christ. This would be from a more awakened helper who is themselves still in a process of awakening. And it says that the egoless psychotherapist is an abstraction, meaning not a fact, but it's more of a concept that stands at the end of the process of healing. Because and then there's some mystical references here that you would be right to question, what does all that mean? And I will offer this suggestion that it implies that the therapist who is egoless is too near to God to keep his feet on earth. Now, my interpretation of that is that when a person is done with their work here on earth, they leave. There's no reason for them to remain any longer. However, now I'm talking about in physical form here, but there's this additional mystical reference to those who no longer keep their feet on earth, who are still helping in some way, helping other therapists carry out the plan established for salvation. The psychotherapist on earth becomes the patient of those who have gone before him that have achieved the ideal state. What are we saying? It's saying that the experience and knowledge and understanding of those who have gone on is not lost. It's still a part of the one mind. It's still a part of divine guidance and is still there to help working through other patients to express his thoughts as he receives them from the mind of Christ. So a lot of this is maybe for some of you a bit too far of a stretch, but these things really, it's not essential to this program, this curriculum that you believe or grasp that. What is essential is that you understand that any time two people join together for the purposes of healing, always is there progress made, and that progress is never lost. It even says, in the end, there must be some success. Heather, you had your hand up.
I do. Just part here, it makes me so happy because it says, those that have left the earth, Bill and Helen are still helping us because of the work they did. They're not here anymore, but because of the course, their work is still continuing. And so they're still doing exactly what they were doing, but now from a, higher place because we have the course that they participated in so fully, and it continues to help heal us. So it's that for me, that's an example right there.
That's a very powerful example, Heather. Thank you. I mean, we are basically reading the product of their tireless efforts and benefiting from them. And then there's still other things that go on in the levels of the higher mind that we're not fully conscious of, where they contribute as well. As it says, they express their thoughts as they are received from the mind of Christ. Thank you, Heather, for that. Sandra?
So is this saying that the healing continues even if the relationship discontinues, the healing continues? I mean, a relationship never discontinues,
Correct.
but even if they part ways,
Yes.
the healing continues.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of this is goes on not visible to our human eyes or consciousness. Like, can any of us tell when our mind is healing? I mean, there's no measures for that. And in some cases, well, I'll give this example here. My dad passed away from the earth in 2011, and I still had some unresolved issues with him there. You know, where I held him, he didn't do enough, was kind of my judgment. And I healed from that a few years later. I mean, it continues on even without the presence of the individual there. How much he contributed to that, I have no idea at all. But I know now I see him as a brother, not as someone who failed to give me what I needed, which was my judgment, my guilt issues with him when he passed.
Why
So,
that's so important too. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
go
you.
ahead.
Oh, it's so important because number one, we're all connected, and you know, it's we're never done, and we can't do it wrong because it's just a continuing evolution.
It is. We're all connected, interconnected through the mind of Christ. We'll go on.
As all therapy is psychotherapy, so all illness is mental illness. It is a judgment on the Son of God, and judgment is a mental activity. Judgment is a decision made again and again against creation and its creator. It is a decision to perceive the universe as you would have created it. It is a decision that truth can lie and must be lies. What then can illness be except an expression of sorrow and of guilt? And who could weep but for his innocence? Once God's Son is seen as guilty, illness becomes inevitable. It has been asked for and will be received. And all who ask for illness have now condemned themselves to seek for remedies that cannot help, because their faith is in the illness and not in salvation. There can be nothing that a change of mind cannot affect, for all external things are only shadows of a decision already made. Change the decision, and how can its shadow be unchanged? Illness can be but guilt's shadow, grotesque and ugly, since it mimics deformity. If a deformity is seen as real, what could its shadow be except deformed?
Mm-hmm. So it starts out saying that all illness is mental illness. And since I brought up the example of my father, I think I'll use that to illustrate some of these other points. So then I made a judgment while he was still alive that I didn't get all what I needed from him as a father, that he wasn't there for me. And that was a decision that I made to perceive things in terms of my own judgment of him. And I think my judgment was probably not limited just to him, although it was targeted upon him. And once he was seen as guilty in my eyes, illness becomes inevitable. Inner conflict, being torn between wanting to love, but also being judged against someone. And unbeknownst to me at the time, I asked for it and I received it. I asked for the illness, and in the process had to carry a heavy weight, which I became more aware of after he passed, because he was gone from this earth and I still felt heaviness about the relationship. So clear, that was when it became glaringly obvious that was me. That wasn't him doing it. That was me. Why? Because I had this condemnation and my faith was in the condemnation, not in forgiveness. And so that was my dilemma. And thank God through the Course of Miracles, I prayed on it for, I think, months, if not years. And then it is the truth. There's nothing that a change of mind cannot affect. Because then all of a sudden, I just saw him as a human being that did the best he could with what he knew and what he had. And that if he could have done better, he would have. And what more can I can't ask more from myself. Why could I ask more from him? And all of a sudden I saw him as a good guy and all was forgiven. And it was just a change. The only thing that changed was my mind went from judgment to forgiveness. And that decision to let go of the judgment brought about a deep relief from not carrying this heaviness around anymore. Susie?
So, I've spoken about my golf, and it hit me a few weeks ago. I referred to it as my teacher. And I've had this up and down relationship, idle, special relationship to it. And oh God, I won't get into it, but I went out before by myself, and on hole 2, I had this overwhelming thought come into my mind, like, oh, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be in my journey. And this is my individualized curriculum. And if I see it as a teacher and stop wishing, as the ego does, that it would be different, I had this like incredible, how words can't describe, this like aha, like, oh. And just that, a change of mind, just had just this huge effect on me. And I saw myself as guilty and this and that. So my illness around it all was inevitable. And I chose to perceive it however I was perceiving it. And I'm telling you, like, I know this all to be true. This, at that moment, I just got it. It's taken a long time, but who cares? Time is for healing and learning, right? And it was like, oh, I get it. Accept all things as they are. And I don't know, it was just, I had to share it because it was really a moment of a change of mind. And so, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Sandra?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for sharing your story. It's very important to me because I'm still doing the healing work around my family. But I think the reason that I'm so motivated is because this book tells me that thoughts are things. They're not just floating around, that they actually create.
Yes.
And so if I'm judging another, I'm also told that we're all one. There's no separation. So if I'm judging another or judging my mother or anybody, I'm judging myself.
Mhm.
And it just hurts me. And that's why I get sick from it.
Mhm.
Whether it's judgment or fear, it's going to make me sick. And I've had enough sickness. I'm done with that. I'm going to live out my life being healthy and happy and free. And this gives me the tools so that I can do that. I'm complete.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, so the major thesis of the Course in Miracles is all illness is mental illness, and we bring it upon ourselves by putting faith in the condemnation and judgment, by using the mind as a weapon against, in opposition to others. And so that can look, and the Course would say, many of the things that we find in this world to be so tragic, the treatment that people, the horrid treatment that people suffer from at the hands of others, many times from their own family members, is a direct byproduct of this illness, this sense of guilt, which is then described in the next paragraph.
The descent into hell follows step by step in an inevitable course once the decision that guilt is real has been made. Sickness and death and misery now stalk the earth in unrelenting waves, sometimes together and sometimes in grim succession. Yet all these things, however real they seem, are but illusions. Who could have faith in them once this is realized? And who could not have faith in them until he realizes this? Healing is therapy or correction. And we have said already, and will say again, all therapy is psychotherapy. To heal the sick is but to bring this realization to them.
Mm-hmm. So we just said all sickness is mental illness, and we bring it upon ourselves. And there's an extension to that. Once you bring that illness upon yourself, your ability to contain it and limit it to the object that you started with, in this case, my dad, the mind, the laws of perception are that when you hold that judgment becomes broader, more abstract, as a generalized sense that your mind is here to be used as a judge, to be used as a weapon, and then it'll repeat itself again and again in other relationships, perhaps more subtly, so that on the surface all seems acceptable, but underneath that there are these deep roots of judgment, and that refers to it here as the descent into hell becomes inevitable, because the faith is put in the role of judgment, and that it roots itself in your subconscious mind, believing that guilt is real. And then the further thing is the ego teaches you, you have every right to make that judgment. You're in your right to do that. And so now the mind is completely baffled. It's in hell because of its own choices and believe that it's properly to be that way is rational and reasonable. It's really, and the pain that then it comes out from that is really really sad. There's in the first two chapters of the Course in Miracles where they talk about the great crusade to that this course is intended to bring about, to listen, learn, and do, to be ready, willing, and able to listen, learn, and do. It talks about no longer being willing to tolerate a sense of lovelessness in yourself or in others, and willing to step forward and make a decision to bring about a change of mind. And so that's what brings us to this topic of healing in therapy. It's all a mistake in self-concept and in the use of the mind, and it can be corrected once it's pointed out to us what the mistake was and where is the source of correction.
The word cure has come into disrepute among the more respectable therapists of the world, and justly so, for not one of them can cure, and not one of them understands healing. At worst, they but make the body real in their own minds, and having done so, seek for magic by which to heal the ills with which their minds endow it. How could such a process cure? It is ridiculous from start to finish. Yet, having started, it must finish thus. It is as if God were the devil and must be found in evil. How could love be there? And how could sickness cure? Are not these both one question? At best, and the word is perhaps questionable here, the healers of the world may recognize the mind as the source of illness, but their error lies in the belief that it can cure itself. This has some merit in a world where degrees of error is a meaningful concept. Yet must their cures remain temporary, or another illness rise instead, for death has not been overcome until the meaning of love is understood. And who can understand this without the Word of God, given by Him to the Holy Spirit as His gift to you?
Mm-hmm. So some context here. At the beginning, maybe it was before everybody joined in, Heather and I were talking where she spent 25 years as a psychiatric nurse practitioner and saw 10,000 clients over 25 years. So she has some experience to speak of. And she talked about the model that in Western medicine, it's a licensed profession. There's a model and there are limitations and laws regarding how one can function there, about how the model works. And then eventually that model's limitations, she could no longer work within those limitations. She felt she needed to move beyond that. And so the model here that pretends to cure, they're referring to here, there, is it's ridiculous from start to finish. And was it? Oh, here it is. That even when the therapist has some sense that healing, and that the mind is the source of its own illness, that we've brought it upon ourselves, even when one has that sense, they still believe that the mind can cure itself, meaning separately and independently, your own mind, using the remedies of therapy, will heal itself. Even though we have read again and again, it was the mind that brought this sickness upon itself. How could it then cure itself of the sickness that it has invested so heavily in? So, this is the trap of the model. We're not making a statement about the individuals that serve within the model, but the framework, the thought system that it uses is limited at believing that there are magical cures. A lot of it today is based on pharmaceutical solutions, frankly, but there are other solutions, all independent of the relationship with your true self, that I am as God created me, all of which avoid and dodge, I say all, most all of which avoid and dodge the issue that I am a child of God, I am an eternal being, that's who I truly am. And even though my mind has made a mistake, it can still heal by correcting, by learning to correct. One final statement here. You might ask, it says, yet must their cures remain temporary or another illness rise instead? Yes. 4, death has not been overcome until the meaning of love is understood. And this, in this context, might not be so obvious, but the mind that believes it is tied to the body, that the body and the mind are at one, inevitably is threatened by the concept of death. Because when the body dies, then what's that say about the mind that is tied to it? And so inevitably experiences an existential threat that sooner or later my existence comes to an end. That fear of you no longer existing has to be healed in order for healing to occur. And the only way that can heal is to understand our true nature. In this context, it's expressed as understanding the meaning of love, understanding that you were created by an infinitely loving creator, that you are an extension of that love, and therefore you are an expression of love. That's the only way the threat of biological death as the end of your existence can be overcome. Eternal life overcomes the fear of death. And so until those things are understood in the context of a therapeutic relationship, we're dealing with superficial, external, feel good. Some measures may help us feel better temporarily. These are cures that until another illness arises, where does that illness come from? It comes from the deep existential fear of the end of one's existence, the fear of death. Sandra?
Yeah, this was very helpful to me, Jonica, that the professionals think that the mind can heal itself. Because I've been pretty angry at the professionals because I have children who have diagnosis and they went the medical model. I may have had a diagnosis. I went the spiritual model. And the 12-step model, who said this is a disease of the mind That's what they said. So it was like, okay, well, and we're, you know, we're just in opposite places at this point. And but to understand a little bit more that the professionals think that if you just help the person feel a little bit better, that the mind will heal itself. That helps me to let go of that anger. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, for Sandra, for sharing that. Okay, so remember our intention here is to understand what is the healer, the psychotherapist, what is their role? What are they there for? And it's to help the person to heal, not to be cured by some magical solution or some pharmaceutical solution. So we need to understand even more deeply the nature of the illness.
Illness of any kind may be defined as the result of a view of the self as weak, vulnerable, evil, and endangered, and thus in need of constant defense. Yet, if such were really the self, defense would be impossible. Therefore, the defenses sought for must be magical. They must overcome all limits perceived in the self, at the same time making a new self-concept into which the old one cannot return. In a word, error is accepted as real and dealt with by illusions. Truth being brought to illusions, reality now becomes a threat and is perceived as evil. Love becomes feared because reality is love. Thus is the circle closed against the inroads of salvation.
The ego doesn't want you to hear this. This is exposing the ego with a bright light and is shown to be exactly what it is, a set, I call it a mythology, a view of the self as inadequate, unlovable, and great danger of being killed, and thus in constant need of defense and ready to attack back when threatened. And Noel, and then the anger of being attacked for no reason at all arises naturally from feeling threatened, even though you haven't done anything. Literally, the ego, the mind becomes afraid of its own thoughts. This is mental illness. All the thesis here is that all human beings have passed through this stage, that in confusion, not knowing what the self is, a view of the self as inadequate. None of it is true, and therefore all the defenses that the ego would prop up are useless. But if faith is invested in them, then great effort will be put forth in an attempt to make those defenses work. And all of it is based on a mind that is terribly confused and believes that the error is real. And that the way of responding to the situation is to invoke further illusions to help remedy that situation. And here's where it becomes an existential crisis, because reality now becomes a threat. The very nature of being alive biologically in a body is baked into the self-concept, is threatened. Life itself is a threat to the end of life. And therefore, a person, the attitude of the mind perceives life itself as evil as horrid as hell on earth is the way people describe it. And many people conclude this and take their life because they refuse to go on in the face of such a view of reality, where even love becomes feared. And so this is so tragic. None of this need be. And into this situation, those who are called to help and heal, the messengers of the Holy Spirit, are called to gently and lovingly understand, because we too have walked down this path with our own feet, with our own view of ourselves, and know what it's like to be in the ancient prison of the ego. It's called ancient prison of the ego because it's been around forever. I should say from the beginning of humanity, and it therefore is ancient. But the door is not locked to this prison. You can change your mind. There is another choice. Let's go on.
Illness is therefore a mistake and needs correction. And as we have already emphasized, correction cannot be achieved by first establishing the rightness of the mistake and then overlooking it. If illness is real, it cannot be overlooked in truth, for to overlook reality is insanity. Yet, that is magic's purpose, to make illusions true through false perception. This cannot heal, for it opposes truth. Perhaps an illusion of health is substituted for a little while, but not for long. Fear cannot long be hidden by illusions, for it is part of them. It will escape and take another form, being the source of all illusions.
Mm-hmm. So in that passage before where we talked about cures, cures are temporary distractions from the pain of the pain of an existential nightmare, a temporary distraction that will take your mind off those ideas until the fear returns again. It will escape and take another form because fear is the source of all illusions. And so the Course talks about this a lot, substituting. It says that a healer that does not understand the fundamental error regarding the self-concept, at best can offer another illusion as a substitute for the illusions that the patient is willing to bring into the relationship. And so the goal of the true healer is to not deal with illusions anymore, to see them as they are, and to recognize the fundamental error is the view of the self as unlovable, as inadequate, as separate, as tragic, as condemned to die, and work at that level. Now, that's not to say you immediately dive into that level. This is we're talking about a relationship that unfolds and develops over time, where patient and therapist come to trust one another and come to grow together.
Sickness is insanity because all sickness is mental illness. and in it there are no degrees. One of the illusions by which sickness is perceived as real is the belief that illness varies in intensity, that the degree of threat differs according to the form it takes. Herein lies the basis of all errors, for all of them are but attempts to compromise by seeing just a little bit of hell. This is a mockery so alien to God that it must be forever inconceivable. But the insane believe it because they are insane. A madman will defend his own illusions because in them he sees his own salvation. Thus, he will attack the one who tries to save him from them, believing that he is attacking him. This curious circle of attack-defense is one of the most difficult problems with which the psychotherapist must deal. In fact, this is his central task, the core of psychotherapy. The therapist is seen as one who is attacking the patient's most cherished possession, his picture of himself. And since this picture has become the patient's security as he perceives it, the therapist cannot but be seen as a real source of danger, to be attacked and even killed.
Well, that makes it more difficult to be helpful. So this section is about what is the role of the psychotherapist. Well, let us identify the problem so it can be solved. The patient is defending his own view of reality, has invested his faith in his version of reality, which the therapist realizes is unnecessary, is the basis of his illness. He's brought it upon himself. And so the psychotherapist must deal with this. This is the central task. The core of psychotherapy is to help free the patient from his illusions. And yet the patient cherishes them. And so as the therapist enters into an effort to untangle and suggest the questionable nature of the patient's illusions, the patient will feel attacked. They'll feel their view of reality, their investment in their self-concept as vulnerable and weak and endangered is being threatened by the therapist. And so the patient then feels insecure in the relationship. We just said this is the most difficult problem with which the psychotherapist must deal. On a practical note, this is an aside, I've experienced this in A Course in Miracles in dealing with some participants who are not here any longer, who were overwhelmed with their fear and asked to speak to me privately, and were so deeply invested in their own fearful view of reality that when I brought up the possibility that there would be another way of looking at this situation, they responded defensively. This is talked about right here. This attack defense, curious circle of attack defense is one of the most difficult problems. And so the Course in Miracles student decided that they didn't want to have their view of reality threatened and dropped out. Well, this happens a lot. This happens a lot. And is the right word kudos to you who have stayed with it as your former view of reality was challenged. You had the courage to stick it out and question it. You were ready to let go of that view of reality to see a new way. Just realize that not everyone's ready to let go. And they will then find that the person that suggested they let go view them as a source of danger. Um, and so this can happen when you work with these issues. Susie?
You know what's a little scary about this? Well, I mean, it kind of happened to me. For years, I saw a therapist that didn't want to try to help me change my self-concept because I think he just wanted me to stay there, and keep paying him. Know what I mean? So I, so it's kind of, for me, I'm just so grateful that I found 12 Steps and A Course in Miracles, and that I was ready to give up all that stuff and know that there was a better way. Because this actually happened to me, where somebody didn't want really to help me. They just wanted me to stay there, so they just kept agreeing with me. You know what I mean? Like feeding my issues. It's kind of scary. When you think about, I know that's not what we're talking about now, but
Mhm.
it's kind of scary what can happen out there with a therapist.
Yeah, well, they had a certain cure that they offered, that they had and were invested in that cure. They had put their faith in that cure, which was, this. So yes, these things happen quite a bit. Jeff, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Jonica. Like 4 months ago, before I left for Michigan, this person that I met at this spiritual center was having depression and difficulties, and came up to me and asked if I would help her every morning to set intentions for the day. And I agreed. And we were doing that throughout my time away. And now that I'm back, her view of reality is, I ask her, what is it that you need from me? She can't even tell me what it is. She kind of searched her mind, and she keeps saying, you're not doing what, I'm asking you to do. I said, well, what is it that you're asking me? And she couldn't come up with an answer for that. And I would try to get her to look at something differently, and I could tell she's thinking I'm attacking her. And I'm doing this I'm spending hours with her sometimes, and not all at once, and trying to help her see something to get her out of this mindset that she's stuck in. Because I know that mindset. I've been there a long time ago, many times for quite a while sometimes. And I was starting to disturb my peace. Now, I'm not a trained psychologist, and I'm just learning the course myself. Um, but it seems to me that any suggestion that I make, she'll interrupt and tell me why that she can't do it without even investigating whether or not she could or not, whether it's possible or even trying it. And she starts screaming at me. I don't, I feel for her, and I have compassion. She doesn't really have anybody because she's kind of scared a lot of people away, from what I understand. And I don't want to, just, I'm to the point that I just, when next time she calls, just to say, you need professional help. I don't have what it is you're looking for, and you can't even tell me what it is that you need from me. Um, but then I feel a little like I have to say guilty that like someone's asking for help, and now I'm just going to say I can't help you. I don't know what else to do. Can you give me any suggestion on that? Because every time I try to give her a suggestion, she takes it as an attack.
Well, I don't have a suggestion right now. I wouldn't want to just speak words unless they were guided, particularly given the nature of what you're talking about there. What I am noticing is how remarkable it parallels exactly what we're reading here. So your timing and sharing that, Jeff, is perfect.
Well, the course
Because
was perfect in it, and bringing it up now because this happened
yeah,
earlier today. It's like
let's just establish what we validate as true. There's this curious circle of attack defense going on, and it is a very difficult problem to deal with, Jeff. And so I think your impulse of deferring to someone perhaps better equipped to deal with this difficult problem may be well advised, because they're already the danger signals and yelling and anger are coming up already. And this is where it really experience in this area really helps. I want to go on, but I'm not ignoring your question, Jeff. But in the next paragraph, it addresses this.
okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
It addresses that this is one of the most difficult problems with which anybody trying to help someone will do, if there. And so it's spoken about in the next paragraph, and I want to get that in, and maybe more insight will be revealed.
I mean, I had a deep dive into meditation just to get myself back,
Yes. Yes.
in the right place. So thank you. Okay. I'm complete.
The psychotherapist then has a tremendous responsibility. He must meet attack without attack, and therefore without defense. It is his task to demonstrate that defenses are not necessary and that defenselessness is strength. This must be his teaching if his lesson is to be that sanity is safe. It cannot be too strongly emphasized that the insane believe that sanity is threat. This is the corollary of the original sin, the belief that guilt is real and fully justified. It is therefore the psychotherapist's function to teach that guilt, being unreal, cannot be justified, but neither is it safe, and thus it must remain unwanted as well as unreal.
Mm-hmm. So we're talking about this curious circle of attack defense, that the person that is seeking help now feels threatened by the person who entered into the relationship as the helper. And so, Jeff, here's what this is not easy. this is what we would ideally want, is that you must meet attack without attack, and therefore without feeling a need to defend. I guess in the four agreements, we would say it's not personal. Don't take it personal. This is not about you, because it's just this ancient pattern of attack defense that's just being directed towards you, but it doesn't come from you. So the psychotherapist is to, in that situation, is to demonstrate, in my defenselessness, my safety lies. Defense is not necessary. Defenselessness is strength. When I say this is not easy, this is where experience and having it been down the road a few times, because emotions come up. After all, this is a relationship with someone that you care about, and all of a sudden now you're being viewed in a negative light unfairly, and there's a temptation to respond to that defensively. So, but the healed helper recognizes all that and keeps all that in check. I'm not saying the impulse doesn't arise, but keeps those impulses to defend in check, so that a different message can be conveyed. So you can see how now the person seeking help and the person offering help are on two different pages. Here, one is trying only to do the best they can to help the other person, and the other is viewing them as as contributing to their discomfort. And so it really, a lot depends on the readiness of the person for real change, to let their illusions go. And no one can force readiness on another person. Only the person themselves can arrive at the place where they're willing to let go of their illusions.
Can I say something real quick?
Sure.
I do not feel attacked, and I'm not taking it personally, but I don't know why I'm having a difficult time in my mind saying, you have to go to somebody else. I don't have what you need, or can understand what I can do for you, because you can't even explain to me what that is. And be okay with just stepping away. I think that's where I'm having difficulty, just stepping away from someone that's asking for help, but not being willing or open to it.
Well, you've done the hardest part already, Jeff, as you recognize where your difficulty point is, where your challenge point is, and I'm pray for strength to make the right choice.
All right, thank you.
All right, we're going to close out this section.
Salvation's single doctrine is the goal of all therapy. Relieve the mind of the insane burden of guilt it carries so wearily, and healing is accomplished. The body is not cured. It is merely recognized as what it is. Seen rightly, its purpose can be understood. What is the need for sickness then? Given this single shift, all else will follow. There is no need for complicated change. There is no need for long analyses and wearying discussion and pursuits. The truth is simple, being one for all.
What an amazingly strong note to conclude this subsection with, that there's many cures out there. Did you know that currently in the Western world there are 600 different modes of therapy that have been schools, models for therapy that have been identified? I would call that very complicated. And the Course says that there is no need for complicated change or long analysis and wearying discussions, a decade of analysis and pursuits, because the truth is simple, and that is that the mind has taken on this weight of judgment. Being the judge, it has now the arbiter of who's guilty and who's not. And that weighs on the mind heavily. Ultimately, that same mind will judge God himself in terms of its own fearful beliefs about its ego. And so that becomes a weary, heavy process to carry. And all that is needed for healing to occur is to relieve the mind of this burden of guilt. That is the thesis of the Course of Miracles. It's simple to understand, actually. It's simple to say. It does require practice and a readiness to change. But I'm grateful that there would be the possibility for the healing of people's minds could be so clearly stated, so simple to understand. And with that, a new era in healing the mind can begin. It does require messengers who are willing to serve in relationships with other people, just as Jeff was willing to serve in these relationships and others as well. But know that the fundamental error must be addressed, and that has to do with the judgments that the mind makes. Weaponizing the mind as a tool of judgment is a heavy burden to carry, and this need not be. As far as our reading is going to go today, the next section moves more into something that I think you all will enjoy more, in the sense that the focus will be more on the process of healing. Look, more, you have to let me recognize the problem so it can be solved. You must recognize the problem to begin with, or then what is the solution about if you don't know what the problem is? So we've done that. Now we'll focus on more the role in these therapeutic relationships, the role that we can take towards helping others to heal. And we'll do that in our next session, which will be next Saturday.
Jonica,
yes,
can I give a teaser for the next session that I think will Jeff might appreciate?
Please do.
This is from the next section. Let us remember that the ones who come to us for help are bitterly afraid. What they believe will help can only harm. What they believe will harm alone can help. Progress becomes impossible until the patient is persuaded to reverse his twisted way of looking at the world, his twisted way of looking at himself. The truth is simple.
Thank you, David. Much appreciated. I can't wait till Saturday now.
That's a teaser, see? Keeps it coming back.
Well, I got something to look forward to. There's the answer.
Yeah, no, that was really very pointed, David. Thank you. That really brings, I think, to a closure for the moment, some of the questions that Jeff had. So it's an ongoing process here. It's a learning journey, and there are multiple steps to it. We've taken a big set of steps just in understanding the nature of the problem, which apparently in many of the 600 models for therapy is not recognized. So this is a major step forward just to be able to simply understand what it is that what it is that needs to change. So, David, thank you for reading. Thank you all for your comments. Thank you for your courage to have held in there throughout this curious circle of attack and defense and change of self-concept. This is why I say that it takes a lot of courage because many people respond with fear to the idea of having their self-concept changed. And those of you that are still here have shown the courage that you're willing to stay around and heal at whatever the cost. So I honor you. Namaste.
Namaste.
Kudos, everyone.
Thank you.
Love you all.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, family.
One. Namaste.
Jonica,
Hi, Georgette.
Jonica,
Yeah.
Hi, Sue.
Susie and I will be gone for 2 weeks.
But I'm going to try to be, we're going to be